up Israel, and I want to ask you, what would you do differently? You've defended Israel's right to protect itself, but what would you do differently?
Well, I hate to say this but I have to. It would have never happened. I had Iran in a good position. We would have had to deal with Iran within 2 weeks after the election if it wasn't rigged. The election was rigged and stolen. We would have had to deal with Iran. Iran was broke. I say respectfully, they were broke when I was president. They had a situation, you remember, they hit one of our drones, and I hit them, and it was now their turn to hit back. I just told this 2 weeks ago to a group, and they found it somewhat fascinating. They called us to tell us that we're going to hit back, here's the target, but we're not going to hit the target, we're going to just miss it. It's a military base. You know what I'm talking about. That was quite an evening. And they send in 18 drones, 5 of them self-destructed. The rest of them essentially missed the base. They were outside the base in areas where there weren't. Nobody was killed with all of that, power. But they called us, they called me, and they told me, look, and this is Iran. This isn't, this is Iran who's supposed to be so hostile. They respected us, and I respect them. But I wanted to make a deal with them, no nuclear weapons. You can't have nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the single greatest threat to this world, to the whole world. And Viktor Orban understands that, and some others do too. And when I hear Biden talking about the Green New Deal and all this stuff, it's just, I'm a very big environmentalist, but this is not the problem. The problem we have is you have certain places where you have madmen controlling the most powerful weapons in history. And it's the single biggest problem for your country, for my country, and for every other country, because this isn't going to be a World War II and a World War I where you had army tanks going back and forth shooting each other. This is obliteration, called nuclear obliteration. And we have a man in charge who has no concept of what he's doing. He's grossly incompetent.
You mentioned Iran. They're also accused of funding groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, which was responsible for the terrorist attack in October 7th.
Well, they couldn't do it with me. They were broke.
But would you think
Iran was broke?
That Israel was prepared, that Prime Minister Netanyahu was prepared for what happened on October 7th and what has happened since?
Look, things like that can happen. It is surprising that a lot of people knew about it and that they didn't, because they have a very high level of intelligence in terms of their service. But so it's a little bit surprising, but things like that can happen. And you can't blame, the big thing will be what's going to happen from this time forth.
Exactly.
And I know a lot of people are looking at that. How could it happen? How could it happen? Well, they were able to keep it secret. They supposedly didn't use the internet. They didn't use phones. They did it the old-fashioned way with couriers and paper and things that were a little bit different. But the big decision and the big problem is what's going to happen. How is this thing going to end? We have to get it ended, and I don't think the Biden administration is going to get it ended. The problem I have is that the Biden administration, they're doing so many things wrong, and they have such power. This country has such power over the world if you know how to use it. And this could really, the way they're doing it, I really believe could lead, including Ukraine and all of the things that are happening there, I really believe this could end up in a very, very bad situation for everybody, for the whole world, It could end up in World War III.
Do you think there could be peace in the Middle East without the U.S. intervention?
Well, eventually there's peace because you're going to have a winner and a loser. So there's peace. That's the way it works. It'll be very interesting to see. We want to keep some countries out. Yeah, very big nations, some of these people have 4 million, 5 million soldiers. President Erdogan talked the other day, and he was talking about very angry toward Israel. Not good, not good. You want to keep them out. You want to keep them on the sidelines. Once people start coming in, all of a sudden you have a lot of other people coming in, and you end up in a world war. I have to say, though, this is something that never would have happened with me. If I were president, if we had the Trump administration, impossible to happen. We were actually getting along well with Iran. We would have had to deal with Iran. And they didn't have the funds to do what they're doing now. Now they have a lot of funds, not the $6 billion. They gave 5 hostages and 5 hostages. That sounds good. But they also gave access to $6 billion. That's a lot, but that's peanuts compared to the oil money. because we made it so.
And then they freeze those funds, I understand.
Yeah, well, they have over $100 billion. So, a lot of people said, oh, they got $6 billion. Well, $6 billion is a lot of money, but they got $6 billion, but they have $100 billion that they've made over the last couple of years with oil. And they didn't make any money with us. We let people know that if they buy oil from Iran, they're not going to do any business with the United States, and they all stopped. And Iran was broke. I say that respectfully, but they were broke. They couldn't do it. I remember there were a lot of problems with Hezbollah. They were all complaining they're not getting any money. That was a good thing. Now Iran is loaded up with money. They're loaded up with cash. I think it's much more than $100 billion, but they're loaded up with money. So that makes it much more difficult to deal. But it has to end.
You had a great relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu during your administration. Do you think he's capable of managing this crisis?
Yeah, he is. It's not an easy crisis to handle. When you look at the demonstrations going on in the United States, people are very surprised. When they see, 50 and 100,000 people demonstrating, and they say Palestinians, we're on the side of the Palestinians, everyone's saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I think Israel has to do a better job of public relations, frankly, because the other side is beating them at the public relations front. That's a very important front. Worldwide, that's a very important front. So they do have to do a better job. But look, that attack on Israel was horrible, what happened. 48 babies with their heads cut off. You look at the level of brutality, that attack was horrible. And now all the attacks are, it's just a big, horrible mess. And it's going to get worse, because there's nobody from the United States who's leading. There's nobody getting this whole thing resolved. You have to lead. You have to be able to lead, and we have nobody that's leading.
You talk about the loss of innocent lives, children in particular.
Yeah.
It's also happening in Gaza.
It is.
I think it's been over 4,000 children that lost their lives since the counteroffensive started.
Right.
How can the U.S. stop the killing of more innocent people, civilians, on both sides of that border?
So you have a war that's going on, and you're probably going to have to let this play out. You're probably going to have to let it play out, because a lot of people are dying. It should have never started. There was no way it would have started. Again, Iran didn't have the money, because Iran's leading this, and only fools would say that's not true. They're leading this. They're very tricky, very smart, very cunning. They're leading it, and it's got to end. But this is a war that's going, the hatred between two sides. They say in history there's never been hatred like this. This has been going on for a long time. I had a friend, a very smart man, great businessman, Sheldon Adelson. You probably heard of him. And he was a great deal maker. And he said to me on numerous occasions, because I said, you can make a deal between Israel and the Palestinians. He said, no, you can't. He said, it's not a deal that's possible to be made. I said, you're wrong, Sheldon. And we argued about it endlessly. He was a very smart guy, very successful guy, as you know. He felt the deal could never be made. And I understand it. The hatred is so incredible. They learn to hate Jewish people in the earliest forms of school, whatever their form of school is. But, hate Israel, hate people. It's very hard. There is no hatred like the Palestinian hatred of Israel and Jewish people, and probably the other way around also. I don't know, it's not as obvious, but probably that's it too. So sometimes you have to let things play out, and you have to see where it ends. The sad part is there would have never been an attack on Israel, and there would have never been a counterattack on
Gaza.
Yeah. I mean, Gaza, what's happening to Gaza, it's just unbelievable.
You've seen the images, heard the stories.
No, it's horrible. It's horrible on both sides. It would have never happened.